We need to go to the bullpen. Welcome, baseball fans, to the latest episode of the Highland Bullpen. Now, the end of the regular season is coming up faster than Trey Turner rounding second base. So we've got some fantastic stuff to talk about this week, as our teams have differing ambitions for the last 4 weeks of the regular season. Now, we'll start off with Yorkshire Dave, whose Boston Red Sox have had an up and down season so far, and has it largely been an up and down week for the Red Sox over the past 7 days, Dave?
Yeah, well, August, the whole month of August is going to be the first month this season that Boston will end up with a losing record. You know, they had a great start to the season, April 17-10, May 15-11, if I've got my numbers right, June 18-10. Then I think it was in July, just either side of the All-Star break, when things started, going vastly awry. But July, they managed to have a winning month, 13-12. But this month, it's going to be, despite winning the last 3 series, they're definitely going to end up under 500 for August, because I think they're 12-15 now, 1 game to go. But that's against the rampant Rays. So there's possibly reasons for it. I think, if you go to the forums and some of the podcasts mentioned before, the Boston fans really get ripped into the team, the owners, and Chaim Bloom, who's kind of in charge of recruitment, so they didn't really do enough in the trade. But actually, Schwarber's hitting really well. The 2 guys that got the bullpen, I'm not sure about them, but they're missing the poor lad Renfroe, who's he's out on bereavement leave. He's already missed 3 or 4 games. I don't think he's going to be back I think they've suggested maybe he might be out for a week, 7 days. We won't go into details, but so that's been terrible for him, and he's been really, really good both in the field and hitting. Plus, they've been hit by COVID. They've been relatively lucky this season. They've missed out on that. And we know from our own fantasy league team, because we've got Hunter Renfroe in there, and Kiki Hernandez picked up COVID and had symptoms. So he had to stay behind. I think it was in Toronto, so he had to stay behind there for at least 10 days. So he will be out. And just the other day, the bullpen was already suffering a bit for various reasons. And there's 1 or 2 other guys in there, including the all-star closer Barnes, who's contracted or tested positive for COVID. So they're out. So they've been struggling. But despite all this, put in the positive, you got to be positive, haven't you? Despite all this, Boston, they do remain in the second wildcard spot. I think they're 2 games above Oakland A. And in fact, despite the fact that the Yankees have had one of their hottest streaks in their history, didn't they win 13 straight, something like that? They're actually only 2 games behind them. But, they've got another 3 games in Tampa to get over. They play them again at home, and they're looking good, Tampa, really outstanding all-round team. I think they've not scored more runs than anyone else in Major League Baseball just now, probably by 1 or 2 runs over the Astros. Their starting pitching is pretty good. They do things really well there. And the guy who was pitching last night, 21-year-old, I think they got in a prospect in a trade when they traded Blake Snell. And this is what they do. They bring a guy in, they spot something in him, and he was absolutely superb. And their bullpen, we all know the value of a good bullpen, don't we, lads? That's possibly one of their best, but their hitting is fantastic, especially against the Red Sox, by the way. So, good luck to them. And Boston is still in it, It's only, about 30 games to go, but They need to sort of settle their team up as best they can, with missing these two guys, two important guys in their lineup, have been all season, and the latest problems with the bullpen.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Both in terms of the Rays have been a real standout. Before we came on air, myself and Dave Jr. were talking about them as well as being, the most impressive outfit there. But yeah, the Red Sox have had their slump, if you like. They seem to have steadied the ship a little bit, it looks like, over the last little period of time. Yeah, Dave, I think.
Yeah, they won that. I think Cora said, he acknowledged that they've got swept by the Yankees, which never goes down well with the Red Sox Nation, but especially when, they were always, the direct opponents in that division. But this time it's for the wild card, really. The Rays are going to end up with that, aren't they? They're quite clear. But since then, he said what we need to do is win series, and they did that. But, whether they'll be able to, it's unlikely that they're going to beat, unless they win the next 3 games against Tampa, that's going to be tough.
It could be a really exciting finish to your season there, because I think one of your the last week of the regular season for the Red Sox starts off with you taking on the Yankees in a 3-game series. And if it keeps as tight as it is just now, that could be absolutely crucial, that 3-game series starting on the 25th of September. So, yeah, it's still all to play for the Red Sox, Dave. And I guess at the start of this season, I know you had worries about the pitching and some other areas as well. So would you probably have accepted being in this position back then?
Yeah, at the moment, they're in the playoffs, aren't they? And, that series at Fenway is going to... In fact, they finish after that. If they're still in contention, their last 6 games are against 3 games away to Baltimore and 3 games at Washington. I think I mentioned this before. It's maybe I've got an eye on that, thinking, well, they should be able to finish well. So, I mean, Baltimore. Was I hearing right last night that the Tampa Bay Rays got a fantastic record against teams in their own division, which always helps. Well, I think they're 18-1 this season against the Orioles.
Wow.
Which, that's pretty...
That'll do it. That will certainly help you get to a good record. And I guess from my Mariners perspective as well, maybe I don't want to say our luck has finally run out, because that suggests some of these hard-fought victories have been down to luck, but a lot of the close games that we were edging, we went through that spell where winning 9 out of 10 games. When it came down to games that were settled by just 1 run, the Mariners won 9 out of 10. We were the kings of the close games. Yeah. That's changed over the last week or so, and I fear that my Lucy and Charlie Brown football comparison is coming exactly true, because we've started to drop games by a single run. The Royals edged us out. The Astros did it today by a single run. And even the other ones, like the Royals beat us a couple of times by 2 runs as well. These close games that the Mariners were maybe padding out their win record with early in the season are starting to go in the other direction. And we've got quite a lot of games coming up against the Astros as well, who've obviously been a form team as well, and kind of division rivals. And the Oakland A's as well, looming large for the Mariners. So I think our season is in danger of petering out to some extent. But, we're talking there about the Red Sox and would you have settled for this? And I'm confident the Mariners will have a winning season, that they'll break 500 for the season and probably be substantially above that. And I would probably have taken that at the start of this season, because I think we are in the middle of a building phase.
Definitely a positive for the Seattle Mariners. And, I think it's quite similar to the Red Sox, winning a lot of close games. But, we've talked about this many times. Baseball, they play so often, and there's so many things that happen and they can go for you or they can go against you. And, when you're winning these close games, quite often the difference between winning and losing is, a bloop. single in your favour that scores a guy, or a 50-50 call that just goes your way, and then all of a sudden you start losing those close games, being the same with the Red Sox. But I would say, from what has happened for the Red Sox in the last couple of seasons, this is an improvement, and definitely for Seattle, they're on the way up, aren't they? You can see that.
Yeah, no, that's the way I look at it as well. And tell you what, there's a kind of pleasing symmetry to how our teams are performing here, because the three of us, and I should point out that our esteemed bullpen bro Alan is celebrating his birthday today, which is why he's not joining us just now. We hope Alan will be toasting his birthday, and we won't give away the age. But yeah, we hope he's having a fantastic one, and we look forward to welcoming him back to captain the ship next week. But our three teams, so the Mariners have finally given up hope. I've accepted that those kind of outside hopes of a wild card have bitten the dust. Yorkshire Dave's Boston Red Sox are firmly in the mix to make it through to the postseason, but it's still all to play for. And yourself, Dave Jr., can sit back, relax, get the cigar out, because your White Sox have been guaranteed that kind of top of the table position for quite a while now.
Good evening. There's absolutely still a lot to play for, Richard. I know that might sound a cliche, but and so just getting back again, happy birthday to Alan. Like you said, we won't disclose his age, but it's not too different from the Tampa Bay run differential for the season. Let's just say that. The way things are going with the White Sox, yes, the league should be tied up. I think it might be the strongest league across any of the divisions. You've got to keep going, though, because you could lose 10 games in the space of 2 weeks. The way things go, a few injuries, so you've got to keep things going. We should be okay. It's really a case of just now positioning and jockeying ourselves as best we can for the playoff position. And I think, not to give it away, but we're 1 month away until the end of the season. And I'm sure that over the next week or two, between the four of us, we'll be able to start to flesh out that post-season look a little bit more, not just learn about the off rules, but we'll try and explain them to our listeners as well, and just which teams are going to slot in at which point. And at the moment, as you said, the Mariners look as if they're ducking out a wee bit, but I'd be confident. It'd be nice to see Dave's Boston involved, even if it's as a wild card entry just now. But talking about that division, in the last week, I think the White Sox have helped push Toronto back and maybe vanquish them from the run-in a little bit to help Boston. And again, sadly, it's a wee bit too late for the Mariners, but we went up to Toronto, and they're a team a bit like yourselves, Richard, perhaps a little bit further down the line in terms of development. They've got a great young team. Vlad Guerrero is just an absolute pleasure to watch. He just seems like a really good young man as well. He doesn't seem like one of those little nyaffs in football that you don't really care for. He just seems like a real good guy. A lot of these baseball players actually seem pretty level-headed, if I'm being honest. And we've also got the lad Simeon, really intrigues me for Toronto as well. I'm sure there's another big name. Is it Bo Bichette? He's with Toronto. And again, they've got some really good names, but I was pleased to come away from Canada with a share of the 4 games. That worked out quite well before we rolled on to a crosstown series against our old rivals, the Cubs. So a few weeks ago, we went over to their bit and absolutely panned them 3-0 across the 3 games, which would be similar to Rangers or Celtic going across the city and kind of winning every Old Firm game that season. So Cubs were coming over to Guaranteed Rate for a bit of revenge. And I tell you what, any fans that picked up tickets to that series over the weekend must have an absolute treat. So the White Sox came away 2-1 winners, which means that 5-1 overall over the 6 games, and they win the Chicago Crosstown Cup, which, I'm not really sure. You get 2 of the 30 teams playing for it every year, so there's not really much opportunity for other teams to pick that up, but it must be a nice thing, maybe if you work alongside a cubby and your work in Chicago and you can lord it up over them for the year. That might be the only the only real outcome there. Sorry, Richard.
No, I was going to say, and you know, we all love a fierce sporting rivalry. I mean, the city that I'm in just now, Glasgow, is famed for winning the world of soccer, but it was getting a little bit heated, a little bit feisty in the stands there at the weekend. I noticed, Dave Jr., there was quite a lot of footage emerged, as there often is these days. You can't get away with anything or hide anything, of some scrapping in the stands between the Cubs and the White Sox fans. And I wonder if that was maybe just, as you say, it's been a fairly one-sided season to date, and an old-fashioned shellacking at the weekend. But it's it's not something I've ever really seen in my limited experience of baseball games. And I wonder if either of you two had ever seen any kind of stuff turning physical at baseball games you've been at.
I've been led to believe it's a reasonably friendly rivalry between the two teams, and perhaps it's because in recent years there doesn't seem to be that much of a rivalry, sporting anyway. And I believe that the Chicago natives supported the Cubs during their World Series win to an extent. And likewise, I think back in 2005, the Cubs might have supported, again, a little bit reluctantly, but seeing the White Sox do well, I think they're big in their sports in America. And I think they would perhaps rather see your neighbours do it than someone across the road. The only one that really sticks out, and it is leading it on nicely to Dave, to me, the big sporting rivalry in baseball does seem to be between Boston and the Yankees. So that's the one that seems to me that's always a little bit of niggle. I mean, there seems to be niggle amongst all the teams to a certain degree, but the one that really gets for fans looks to me like it is with Boston and New York. Would you agree, Dave?
Yeah, and until recently, until this century, really, it was a rivalry, but Boston have always been competitive, but they obviously went that 80 odd years without a World Series win, whereas the Yankees, as everyone knows, they've got something like 30 plus, 27, is it? Something like that. I'd need to look it up. But so, yeah, the rivalry is real and it's heightened. I've never been to a Red Sox Yankees game, but I would imagine it's pretty feisty. Although I don't think you get sort of busloads of fans going over in the same way, or a baseball special like you used to do in the 1970s. A train arrives and it's duly wrecked, and 2,000 Leeds United fans get off at Old Trafford, and there's a big punch-up. But America's a big city, a big place, isn't it? And Red Sox fans are all over, Yankees fans are all over. So there's always some opposition fans in there. Might be pockets of them, and occasionally you'll get. The first game I ever went to wasn't a sellout by any means, but it was at Fenway Park, and I just heard somebody shout, "Hey!" quite early on in the proceedings. "Hey, there's a brawl!" Not a fight or a scrap or a rammy, but a brawl, which was good in itself. And I think it was just a localized flare-up with guy maybe said the wrong thing to surrounded by the wrong guy, and it ended up in a bit of a fight. But I've never seen really sort of, fights like we used to have in the 70s and 80s here in the stands, which seemingly happened, in the Chicago game. What do they call it? I know it's a Subway Series in New York, but does it have a name?
You know what? Sorry, Dave Jr.
Oh, I'm just going to say, I'm not too sure, Dave. I seem to remember that when we had our friend on from Chicago a few months ago, he did mention that there was a name for the series, but I'd be lying if I said it came to me off the top of my head. Richard, can you remember it all?
Yeah, well, all I was going to say was you did create a great opportunity there. I would recommend listeners to check out that episode. It was episode 6 of season 2, where we caught up with Matt Zosawaski from the excellent Pinwheels and Ivy baseball podcast from Chicago. And Zoe did talk to us about how it was a fierce rivalry, but yeah, you're recalling that quite right, Yorkshire Dave. He did also say that reluctantly, with a heavy heart, they do tend to support each other when it comes to, the major opportunities, the World Series, for example. They put a loyalty to their city ahead of their loyalty to the team. But a proper sporting town, Chicago. And I do wonder, Yorkshire Dave, what separates a fight from a brawl. See, to me, a fight's got a certain more, I'd expect some fairly tasty guys that know what they're up to, whereas brawl, I can imagine big mist, haymakers, beer, plastic beer glasses flying, etc., that kind of thing.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It was it wasn't defined proper jabs followed by a nice uppercut. It was just like two or three guys just grabbing each other and trying to get at each other, and then a friend pulling him off. Pardon me. Try to separate them, shall I say? And it wasn't particularly serious, and it was far enough away for. I was at the only NFL game I've ever been to was around about the same time, mid-90s, and that was a Seahawks at Foxborough against New England Patriots, and it was billed as the two great young quarterbacks playing, but there was a disturbance behind us, right, and it was getting to the point where there probably was a punch thrown. Next thing you know, there's an police officer there, and it looks round and he's got his hand on his gun, right? So that's the point at which the fight definitely stopped. Now, I'm not advocating our police taking guns into our sports venues, but it was a bit of a sobering moment.
Yeah, one thing I did spot in the footage from that, that brawl in the stands in Chicago at Guaranteed Rate Field was, the bit I saw, I think, was provoked by a female fan celebrating in fairly ostentatious fashion. And I think that I had the look of something that had probably been building up during the game, to be honest with you. But what struck me there, as it often does when I lament the world of social media, apart from the excellent Highland podcast, our Twitter and our other social media accounts, which are well worth following. But in general, social media has led to this thing where you get 10 people, 20 people got their phones out recording this scrap instead of anyone actually thinking, you know what, this is a game, this is a sport, let's just help sort these idiots out and grab one off the other. You know what I mean? There's a bit of that. But maybe am I just getting old and bitter, Dave Jr., or did I start out young and bitter, perhaps?
No, I know exactly what you mean, Richard. It's the same. I know it's changing tact, but it's the same at concerts now. Whenever you see people, everyone for the first 10, 15, 20 rows of kind of standing folk, everyone's got their phone out. Nobody ever watches them back anyway. They just seem to send them to friends who get annoyed that, they're suddenly seeing some clunky video of a song really badly sung when they'd rather listen to the album version. But no, just put your phone away. Leave them at the door. Leave them in your jacket. And if you're there to enjoy a spectacle, enjoy it. And if you'll allow me to kind of pick up there about enjoying the spectacle, the three games between the two Chicago clubs were out of this world. So I managed to catch the two that I did watch were the two White Sox wins. And the first night you had, after half an inning, with the Cubs being the visiting team, the Cubs batted first and were 6-0 up, at which point our starting pitcher was taken out of the game. Dallas Keuchel, a World Series winner, got a ring on his finger, and he was taken out after one inning because the White Sox found themselves 6-0 down. And we went on to win the game 17-13. So, there's some other great stats in that game. The guy that came in to replace Dallas actually set a record in the MLB. So he was the first relief pitcher to come in and throw 5 innings without giving any runs up. So he left the game, came in as a relief pitcher, pitched 5 innings, which is some going. And he's the first guy to do it since 1917, which was really quite interesting. I think he'd 6 or 7 or 8 strikeouts as well, which, again, a bit of a record for a relief pitcher over that duration. At the same point, you had the returning catcher who I think Dave might be speaking about later on when we're rounding up the fantasy baseball segment. But Yasmani Grandal made his comeback after a few months out. And Alan and I were sharing a bit of chat. Alan came over to my house during the week for an hour and we're talking about all things baseball. And I said, well, Grandal, it's his first night back. You might not want to put him back in the lineup. Could be a bit rusty. So Grandal, of course, came in that night and batted in 2 home runs, 8 RBI to tie a club record, and absolutely decimated things on a fantasy points basis. So he was the absolute star man of the night. Leading on to night 2, where Lance Lynn was pitching for the White Sox. And for anyone that doesn't know Lance Lynn, we've spoken about him before, an all-star for the White Sox. I think he was leading the American League for ERA. I think things have tailed off a wee bit after this game. Lance Lynn, he's the type of guy, Google him. He's basically who your dad's favourite baseball player would be. He's just a man's man. He's a big burly bear of a man. Doesn't take any nonsense. He'd be the guy that your dad says he's a proper baseball man. But the White Sox went on to lose that 7-0, which is remarkable. The night after scoring 17 runs, there's a shutout at home, which is crazy. And then the next night, completely flipped back, and the White Sox took that 13-1 with home runs galore. And again, Eloy Jimenez has an absolute habit of coming back to bite the Cubs in the bum, who he was traded from. I think he's played something like 12 games against the Cubs now, and he's knocked in 12 runs. He's hit 6 homers, all sorts of crazy stats from Eloy. But he's a good guy as well, making his comeback. And that sort of tied off the series for the White Sox. And just to bring it full circle to talk about fans, something that I noticed during the game, more and more you notice, fans aren't really segregated when it comes to baseball, dotted all amongst the park. And I think it's really quite telling. You get a White Sox guy smashing a home run in, and a Cubs fan will catch the ball and be over the moon. You can see from the shirt who supports. Then the other way about, you could have a Cubby smashing a home run, and a White Sox fan catches it, and it's an absolute memento. You can't really imagine that in the world of football, where Alfredo Morelos scores for Rangers, kicks a ball into the crowd, and a Celtic fan puts the ball up his jersey and thinks, I'm taking that home. That's a hell of a memento there. It just doesn't work that way. But baseball, again, they just do things differently in America.
They do indeed. Unfortunately, some of us look like we're hiding a football or two up our jumper all the time naturally. Dave Jr., but I agree that would be a fairly unique memento and not something you'd see on our side of the pond. Definitely there. And I guess looking at that, MLB have recently announced that the postseason schedule as well. So we can all of us, but particularly those, and both your teams fall into this category, who can still dream of appearing at the Fall Classic. We can all begin looking forward to the World Series now as well. And it's, there's the potential for tiebreaker games. I don't know why that hadn't occurred to me, but of course, they would take place immediately after the regular season concludes on Sunday, October the 3rd. Any tiebreakers would be played on the 4th, or would begin on the 4th. But I don't know why that didn't occur to me. Obviously, if teams finish with identical records, they don't go to away runs or whatever, the equivalent of away goals in football, which we don't even do anymore. So it's interesting that they go directly to, you take each other on rather than going to total runs or anything like that.
Is that for the wildcard spot? So
yeah, well, I think it'd be for tiebreakers to get into the postseason, I think.
Yeah.
Yorkshire Dave, sorry, yes, you're right. Yes, no, you're entirely right. It's for, those tiebreakers. So if teams finished with identical, I don't know, like, sort of test my primary 5 level arithmetic here, but if 2 teams finished 84-76 for the seasons, it's the, it
happened that once, that's where we get our sort of, one of our taglines from one of the Scots heard around the world, going back to the 50s. when there was a 16-team MLB, and it would just be 8, 8 in the AL, 8 in the National League, and the top 2 fought it out for the World Series. That was the post series, if I'm remembering that correctly. And then one series, I think it was, around about the 50s, it was the Yankees who were in there for the AL, representing the AL pretty much every year. And then it was a sort of a scrap. It was a whole New York affair, really. In the National League, it was a scrap between the Giants and the Dodgers. And one season, they did finish. It was a 154-game season then. I'm pretty sure they finished with identical records, and they went to would it be a 3-game playoff series, maybe 5-game? But that was the game in which Bobby Thompson, scored the shot that was heard around the world. Was it a 3-run homer when there were 2 behind, or something like that? And there's fantastic history behind sort of these one-off games or one-off series.
Absolutely, yeah, and your memory is spot on. That Bobby Thompson, baseball's most famous Scot, it was indeed a 3-run homer at the bottom of the 9th, with the Giants trailing 4-2 at the time and 2 runners on base. So that was, always nice to shoehorn a reference to that into an episode of Highland Bullpen. Now, that was a kind of fantastical baseball moment. And in the modern day world of fantasy baseball, obviously our own Highland Bullpen is coming to the close of that season. And in fact, has the fantasy baseball season closed actually for us?
It's actually, we've got 2 weeks to go at the regular season. So let me see if I can get this right. There's 16 teams in the UK Baseball Podcasters League that we're the rookies this year, and so it's a 22-week or 22-game regular season. So you have 15 games, which we have done, and then you play. The sequence repeats again for the next 7. So the first 7 teams that we played, we're playing again. And so last week was the 20th week. So we've got, this week and the week after will be the 2 last weeks of the regular season, and then top 6 playoff. And I think the top 2 get a bye, and then 3rd place plays 6th, 4th plays 5th, and so on until you get to like a World Series. And despite being rookies, and despite what we said before about just picking players from our 4 teams, we've done pretty well. We've hovered around the top 6 all season. Dropped out of it a few times, but last week we had a 9-1 win, which took us up to 4th place. The only thing being that this week we play one of our nearest rivals, the 7th place team, the Yankees, and the last week I think it's Tea and Tops. So it's not done and dusted yet. We've got a 4 or 5 game lead, I think, over the 7th place team. But we've had a poor start, because it's our own teams. What I was saying recently, just earlier, about Renfrew and Hernandez not playing for Boston. Well, they're not playing for the Highland Bullpen either. And Chicago had a night off last night, and they've been scoring some good points. So we were relying on Seattle and Detroit. But I'm sure we'll bounce back tonight. And we just need to get, if we could get a split with the Yankees, that would set us up nicely for the postseason, I hope. We put a lot of effort into it, haven't we? We've sort of really bought into it big style. And Alan, who's enjoying his birthday day, he's been the main man behind it, the main mover and shaker in keeping us up there. We've made quite a lot of trades, which I see some of the other teams are definitely as active as we are, but there's quite a lot of them who probably, in fairness to some of the teams, one who probably picked their team and just that was it. That was their involvement for the rest of the season. But it's a reasonably well contested league, and it's been great fun, and it's good to follow it. I do the fantasy football as well. I think it keeps you an added interest in it.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think the birthday boy, Alan, deserves great credit. He's a man who loves his spreadsheet and his numbers, but he's done a tremendous job. Our very own Joe Torre, they are getting us going up there, and it's been an impressive debut season, I think. And particularly given, for those that don't know, that our teams consisted of players only from the Tigers, the Red Sox, the White Sox, and the Mariners as well. So I think making the postseason would be a tremendous achievement. What would you agree, Dave Jr.?
Definitely. I think I'm sure that if Alan was here, he'd be quite honest as well and say that Dave's done more than his fair share as well. I think maybe Richard and I have took a wee bit of a back seat when it comes to contributing towards the team one anyway. I might be doing you a disservice, Richard, but it seems to be, Al and Dave kind of work things between the two of them, and then if there's some team specifics about the White Sox or the Mariners, Richard and I can chip in. But you guys have done stellar, Dave. It's been really quite good. I would never have expected in a million years to compete so well, and it's not just doing well, but it really is competing. And again, it's testament to that. But I think I'm sure that you both would add in that's not been a chore by any means. I think you've more than enjoyed just working out the different aspects of how you score and how you can perhaps do better each week.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of a full-time job, isn't it? Keeping track of what your own team does. They play every day, and even if you just watch the highlights, the condensed version, to do not just to follow what they're up to, but to be able to talk reasonably, sensibly about it in something like this, our own podcast. It's that's a full-time job, but getting involved in the fantasy side of it is really good because it forces you to look at other players in the teams, what other teams are doing, and tactics. And it's brought in. I think next season it'll be interesting doing the draft because we'll be looking at other aspects like we didn't really realize before how important guys who can steal bases are, and the relief pitchers aspect, the saves and the holds. We do quite well. We're sort of starting pitcher orientated, but we're learning. It's a brilliant, that Yahoo fantasy, give them the due. It's absolutely amazing. It's very complex, but whoever's set that up, it's pure genius. And it's not like something like the Telegraph fantasy football thing where if you're in the league, you pretty much all end up with the same players. This is a draft so that your team is unique to the other one. So it has, it's a fantasy league, but it's more realistic than others, shall we say.
And I think it realistically captures the infinite variety of baseball. Dave Jr.
Oh, Dave's absolutely spot on. It makes the UK fantasy football leagues look just embarrassingly inadequate when it comes to stats. This is just thousands upon thousands of players, positions, games. I mean, they must have an entire team at Yahoo working on this, some size of office, because not only does it give you all your stats and it kind of break them down historically, it'll project based on who those opponents are. What is Richard Pidgeon going to score over the next 7 days? Because he's going to come up against this team and that team. But again, his stats show that Richard's really good against left-hand pitchers, but he's not so good against right-hand. And the projected pitchers for those teams are A and B, and how they come up with these stats on an individual basis throughout. I mean, there must be some real incredible formulas in there, but they must put a lot of work in, and that might be a podcast in itself, trying to unearth just exactly how big that team is.
It'd be great to get hold of anyone that was involved in that as well. Anyone, involved in putting together these kind of things, because they are fascinating. They're great entertainment, and they've helped us, I think, here in the Highland Bullpen to advance our knowledge of the incredible game that is baseball. And on that note, we will call it quits. That's the end of the bottom of the 9th innings here in this week's Highland Bullpen. Remember to subscribe, share, and follow us on social media. Don't worry. Birthday boy Alan should have sobered up by next week and be back in the bullpen. So we'll all look forward to that. Until next week, have a great one.